Our final presenter visits us all the way from Cairo, Egypt. He is a professor of applied linguistics and translation at the American University of Cairo, and he's the director of the Arabic Translation Studies Division. He has many published translations in a variety of fields, including religious studies, politics, and social studies. As mentioned, he has also recently completed translating the commentary of the Holy Quran by Maulana Muhammad Ali that we publish into Arabic. Now, when seeking a translator to undertake this monumental task, we were obviously very impressed with Professor Hussain Ali's qualifications. But very quickly, we also became very moved by his sincerity as a person and his dedication to applying his academic skills to worthy causes. Professor Ali will be speaking from his personal perspective about the need for the Lahore Ahmadiyya Islamic Society's work in the Arab-speaking world. I present to you Professor Hussain Ali.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يرفع الله الذين آمنوا منكم والذين أوتوا العلم درجات والله بما تعملون خبير. Allah will exalt those of you who believe and those of you who are given knowledge to high ranks, and Allah is aware of what you do. نرفع درجات من نشاء وفوق كل ذي علم عليم. And above everyone possessed of knowledge is the all-knowing one. وأصلي وأسلم على الحبيب المصطفى. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for attending my presentation. I would like to thank Lahore Ahmadiyya for inviting me for this symposium. I would like to thank my dear brother Fazil also for his introduction and for the presentation he gave earlier today. I would like to thank also Dr. Nu'man for his enlightening speech on early caliphates, as well as Dr. Ahmed and Mother Samina, as I like to call her, for their wonderful presentations. I would like to speak today about my experience as a translator of Maulana Muhammad Ali's Holy Quran English translation and commentary. I'm not going to use any PowerPoint, so as not to interrupt with anybody's taking a nap. And the second reason, I actually use PowerPoint to distract the attention of the audience. So they look at the colorful slide and forget about my mistakes. But I think there is much tolerance in that room. 3 years ago, I started that translation. 2 years before that, I was studying most well-known Arabic Quran interpretations, such as Ibn Kathir, Qurtubi, Zamakhshari. These were written more than 1,000 years ago and traveled from one country to another during critical time, during wars, during disagreements. So nobody knows what happened with these resources. Anyway, I want to relay my impression about these interpretations. I will first talk about what I liked about these interpretations and what I did not like. There is no doubt that these interpretations were very helpful, and they helped me understand many things, particularly when it comes to vocabulary which is not originally Arabic, such as in chapter 2, verse 58, the word hitta is not Arabic. So these interpretations were very helpful in that context. In addition, these interpretations make good use of many of the Holy Prophet's traditions, which were originally said to explain some verses. More importantly still, they explain some of the occasions when certain verses were sent down to the Holy Prophet Muhammad. However, I could not understand why they mention many stories, some run 4 pages, some even may be contradicting one another when they interpret certain verses. Some are even childlike, such as those related about the companions of the cave and Gog and Magog. At that time, I gave up reading more interpretations. At that time also, secular humanists and freethinkers grew in number and visibility in Egypt. They casted doubt on everything. My mind was blurred for a while, and I could not find logical arguments when arguing with my colleagues. In addition, at that time, extremism worsened the situation and Muslims were accused of being violent. I never lost my faith in Allah. I was praying every day to find answers to the questions asked all the time by secular humanists who tried to cast doubt on the holy message of Quran. When trying to find my way out of that darkness, I received a telephone call from a lady who asked to meet me. She came the next day and met with me for about 15 minutes. She said, I want you to translate Maulana Muhammad Ali's commentary on the Holy Quran. Although at that time I was so busy and I could hardly find time actually for my own readings, I agreed. She said, I want it within 1 year. For me, that was not possible. 1 year for that huge work, it was not impossible. So I was about to say, sorry, 1 year is not enough. But then as if she could read my mind, she said deeply and passionately, but there is no problem if it takes more than 1 year. And so we come to an agreement. I'm sure you know that lady. That lady is Mrs. Samina Malik, who was speaking just before me on her effort to distribute thousands of copies of the Holy Quran. She is indeed an inspiring person, and she inspired me in many of the things I do in my life. She came to my office looking for a translator, spent 15 minutes with me, but by the time she went out, she left behind her a great deal of inspiration and love. Working on that translation took me many steps closer to the truth, to the Holy Quran, to life, and to myself. As a person who works in the field of education and as a linguist, I find myself consciously and unconsciously analyzing how people process information. And I want to tell you something about the educational system in Egypt and probably in the whole Arab world. In fact, in the Egyptian educational system, we focus more on knowledge rather than skills. So you find people who memorize the Quran interpretations written more than 1,000 years ago, so proud of their knowledge. They think that there is some authority springing from their knowledge. And for them, as well as for many other people, particularly when it comes to the Holy Quran interpretation, skills like analyzing, criticizing, evaluating may not be of any value. For them, it is knowing what rather than knowing how. As a result, they looked at the interpretations of the Holy Quran as sacred writings in themselves, and any attempt to evaluate or criticize is taken as heresy. Let me give you one example. If you take a look at the interpretation of chapter 4, verse 34, that verse is about the relationship between a husband and a wife. And there is the very controversial word. In Arabic, it is وَاضْرِبُوهُنَّ, which literally means beat. That word in Arabic may mean beat, as well as so many other things. In the interpretation of Ibn Kathir, Actually, this is the main source of interpretation that we depend on in the Arab world. He started the interpretation by explaining how a woman cannot be a leader, which is not actually relevant to that verse. And this is not true, as we have many examples in the history of Islam of women leaders. For example, Hadrat Aisha, the wife of the Holy Prophet, was a leader in the broad sense of the word, as she was reportedly asked in many occasions to give advice to the Prophet's companions, male companions, after the death of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. Ibn Kathir stated that beating is allowed as far as it does not cause bruises or broken bones. Slapping the face is not allowed, and beating can be with siwak. Siwak is a teeth cleaning twig. It's small like that. You read that in many interpretations, how a man may beat his wife, and you may even read techniques for that. However, the commentators on the Holy Quran fail to give a single story in which the Holy Prophet Muhammad or any of his companions beat women. There are stories involved with the companions of the Holy Prophet Muhammad in which there were serious conflicts between the husband and the wife. And if beating is allowed, there would be no better occasion to practice it than those occasions. For example, there are stories when there was a clear disagreement between the Holy Prophet Muhammad and his wives. But the maximum he did was to turn away from them without speaking. The story of Zayd and his wife Zainab is still a clear evidence that there was no beating. Zainab was harsh of temper. She never liked Zayd, and she wanted a divorce. Is there any better chance to practice beating than this story? If we take the deeper interpretation of the word beat in the Holy Quran, then we can understand what is said before that verb. In fact, what is said is that if there is disagreement between a man and wife, then they can stay away from one another for a maximum of 3 days without talking to one another. And the Holy Prophet Muhammad said the better of the two is the one who would initiate conversation. Then if the 3 days for two people in love with one another, not talking and staying away from one another, that would cause great psychological pain. And if that pain is not enough for them to come close and talk and discuss their problems, then after the 3 days, they have to start conversation and blame the husband, blame his wife, and that blame for two people who are in love will cause even more psychological pain, so that they decide then to solve their problems. But there is no beating. If that would not solve the problem, then there is divorce, and the woman can divorce herself, which is termed in Islamic Sharia khula. Maulana Muhammad Ali translated وَضْرِبُهُنَّ, literally beat them, into chastise. The word اضربوهن in Arabic has so many meanings, and the word chastise, according to Oxford Dictionary, also means that to cause psychological pain by blaming. In addition, Maulana Muhammad Ali corrects few concepts like jihad, caliphate, which are very important nowadays for the Arab world, particularly with the presence of groups like such as ISIS. I would like also to comment here about Maulana Muhammad Ali's approach in his commentaries. In this context, I would like to start with what one of the prominent scholars of Al-Azhar, Sheikh Mahmoud Shaltut, the late president of Al-Azhar, explains in his introduction to the Holy Quran commentaries. He said, in the Middle Ages, at the time when different groups took sides in Islam and political as well as sectarian differences emerged, and people categorized one another on the basis of affiliation, at that time politics had the upper hand over religion. So people looked at the Holy Quran and started writing commentaries so as to support particular political views. These views were documented and kept up till our times. By time, these interpretations were taken as sacred writings. People who were afraid to look into the Holy Quran, people were afraid to look into the Holy Quran differently. And so they took these commentaries at the final word. This is similar also to what Maulana Muhammad Ali wrote in his preface to the revised edition of the Holy Quran. He said, to the Holy Quran interpretation, he said, I must add that the present tendency of Muslim theologians to regard the commentaries of the Middle Ages as the final word on the interpretation of the Holy Quran is very injurious and practically shuts out the great treasures of knowledge, which an exposition of the Holy Book in the new light reveals. To ignore those great labor would indeed be a sin. They show how freely they commented upon the Holy Book. The great service which they have done to the cause of truth was indeed have been lost to the world if they had looked upon their predecessors as uttering the final word on the exposition of the Holy Quran, as most theologians do today. Maulana Muhammad Ali did not take the final word from his previous commentators without critical thinking. His commentary is in fact training for readers to think critically. The most significant feature of his commentary is that it is written in an academic style that keeps a balance between the Holy Quran as a book of guidance and the Holy Quran as a book for contemplation. The commentary addresses the mind, the heart, and the soul. I had the chance in my career to examine various Quran translations as a scholar, as a supervisor, and as a teacher of translation, trying to find examples to support theories of translation that we teach in classes. Taking into consideration that the Holy Quran is multi-layered in meaning and that its style is too elegant and pure for any translator, I could not find a translation which is academic enough to support my views on translation. Most translators realize that Quran translation cannot contain the multi-layered meaning of the Holy Quran. The solution and even the recommendation of some scholars is to convey the intended meaning rather than the literal meaning. That solution sounds safe and logical, however, it makes the meaning shallow and restricts critical thinking and creativity on the part of the reader in comprehending the holy text. The only translation I may claim that kept the richness of the spirituality of the Holy Quran is Maulana Muhammad Ali's. This is due to a number of features that Maulana Muhammad Ali introduced in his translation. First of all, Maulana Muhammad Ali explains in the introduction his approach to translating the Holy Quran. In the preface to the revised edition, he states, I have tried to be more faithful to the Arabic text than all existing English translations. It will be noticed that additional words as explaining the sense of the original have generally been avoided, and where necessary, and these cases are very few, they are given within brackets. Wherever a departure has been made from the ordinary or primarily significance of a word, reasons for this departure has been given in a footnote and authorities have been amply quoted. Faithfulness to the holy text cannot be achieved by conveying the intended meaning alone, and Maulana Muhammad Ali did not find that enough. Instead, Maulana Muhammad Ali gave all necessary explanations in the footnotes. The explanations are usually supported by authorities, references, or at least sound arguments. In addition to the footnotes, Maulana Muhammad Ali commenced each chapter with ample introduction explaining the development of the chapter and the relationship among its sections, as well as the relationship between the chapter and the preceding and following chapters. My work on that translation was indeed a blessing from Allah. It helped me to understand what I could not understand from Arabic religious literature. In reading many Arabic books, Arabic religious literature, many people find themselves driven by various emotions, mainly fear and love, without critically thinking of what they read. With Maulana Muhammad Ali's calm language, readers are encouraged to think while they read. I can claim that this is what we need at the time being in the Arab world. We have seen the print word as a sacred word for so long, and it is time to read literature, particularly religious, that stimulates thinking and creativity rather than just love and fear. Maulana Muhammad Ali, following the steps of Hadrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, has been a great reformer of his age. In his introduction to the translation, Maulana Muhammad Ali explained that the miracle of the Holy Quran cannot be solely explained in the light of the elegance and purity of language. The uniqueness in form is indeed accompanied with uniqueness in impact. The Holy Quran has transformed the lives of millions of people. With the introduction of Maulana Muhammad Ali's English translation and commentary of the Holy Quran, the transformation has reached and still to reach the lives of some more people. The speakers of Arabic are indeed in need today more than any time else for the commentary of Maulana Muhammad Ali. They are in need for a book that stimulates thinking and revives spirituality rather than a book that inspires fear and love. To conclude, I did my best to keep all the features and the meaning of the text intact, and I hope that the Arabic version motivates people to exert more effort to study Islam and reform the religious Islamic discourse, particularly in the Arab world. Thank you very much.